Chapter 1. The Mockery Begins. The Galactic Assembly was abuzz with excitement. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to observe what was expected to be the grand demonstration of human military technology. Earth, a relatively new member of the interstellar community, had long been underestimated. Despite their rapid advancement in space travel, their military hardware was considered primitive by galactic standards. The assembly hall was filled with murmurs and suppressed laughter as the humans prepared their presentation. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Assembly was a cavernous chamber of iridescent metal and shimmering holograms. Intricate designs representing each member species adorned the walls, swirling patterns of light that shifted and danced. The council itself was made up of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy, each species occupying ornate platforms suspended in mid-air, forming a circular arena that overlooked a central stage where the human representatives stood. Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force, UEDF, stood at the center, flanked by her team of officers and soldiers. She was a tall, imposing figure with sharp features, short-cropped black hair, and the steely gaze of someone who had seen her fair share of conflict. Beside her stood Lieutenant Mark Rivera, a weapons specialist with a passion for precision engineering, and Dr. Aisha Malik, an expert in advanced human weaponry and cybernetics. The alien representatives looked on with a mix of amusement and condescension. The Jarek, a reptilian species known for their overwhelming brute strength and battle cruisers the size of moons, snickered openly. Their leader, General Krastal, a towering figure clad in dense organic armor, leaned forward, his slitted eyes gleaming with mockery. "This is what the humans have to show?" Krastal sneered in his gravelly voice that rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "I expected more than metal clubs and primitive kinetics." Beside him, the Lithari, a race of ethereal beings composed of semi-translucent energy, shimmered with pulsating lights. Their representative, Counselor Thraxus, radiated waves of disdain. Indeed, they still rely on slug throwers, crude archaic tools that launch metal projectiles. This should be amusing. The Varian Syndicate, a race of insectoid beings with chitinous exoskeletons and sharp mandibles, clicked and chirped amongst themselves. Their leader, Overlord Yakel, waved a claw dismissively. It is no surprise. The humans lack the intellectual capacity to develop weaponry beyond their Stone Age methods. Commander Vasquez remained calm, her face impassive despite the ridicule. She had anticipated this response. For months leading up to this demonstration, the Galactic Assembly had been bombarded with reports of Earth's supposedly inefficient military systems. They had heard tales of energy weapons, plasma fields, and nanotech, yet humans had chosen to remain curiously silent about their core arsenal. Vasquez knew that this silence had been misinterpreted as weakness, exactly what they wanted. Lieutenant Rivera activated a small device on his wrist, and a holographic display flickered into existence above the central stage. The image showed a sleek, dark weapon that looked like an advanced rifle with multiple attachments, but compared to the massive alien armaments seen throughout the galaxy, it seemed almost quaint. "This," Rivera began, his voice steady, "is the AR-57 Gauss rifle, one of the primary weapons of the United Earth Defense Force. It may appear modest in size, but its capabilities are unparalleled." Krastal roared with laughter, his baritone laugh echoing through the hall. "Do you expect us to be impressed by this toy? What can such a minuscule device accomplish that our warships cannot obliterate from orbit?" The assembly followed suit, chuckles and guffaws spreading among the various representatives. Counselor Thraxus waved a delicate hand, his voice dripping with mockery. "Ah, yes, the humans are known for their bravado. Perhaps this is merely a form of entertainment." Commander Vasquez did not flinch. She pressed a button on the podium, and a series of holographic projections emerged, showcasing detailed schematics, test footage, and live demonstrations of human weapons in action. The audience quieted slightly, but the skepticism remained palpable. The footage displayed scenes of soldiers firing projectiles at targets, but to the aliens, it all seemed so outdated, so primitive. After all, their civilizations had long since moved beyond kinetic weaponry, in favor of energy beams, antimatter disintegration rays, and gravitational disruptors. To truly appreciate our weapon systems, Dr. Malik chimed in, one must understand the principles we employ. We combine traditional kinetic force with advanced magnetic acceleration and directed energy manipulation. This is the heart of our Gauss technology, allowing us to achieve velocities and impact forces that rival, if not exceed, energy weapons in specific scenarios. The Jarek general scoffed. Energy weapons are superior in every way. Your bullets are laughable in comparison. The murmurs of agreement from other species in the assembly reinforced his statement. The representatives saw nothing but a regression to outdated methods. Unable to comprehend that there could be a logic behind Earth's insistence on kinetic weaponry, but what the aliens failed to realize was that humans didn't see warfare the way most other species did. To them, warfare was a constantly evolving art of efficiency, adaptability, and precision. Commander Vasquez allowed the laughter to subside before she continued. I can see why you're skeptical, and I don't blame you. After all, you have been raised in societies that value overwhelming power, brute force, and mass destruction. But we, humans, have learned that precision and adaptability are far more effective in real combat scenarios than simply wielding larger weapons. She nodded to Lieutenant Rivera, who pulled up a live feed of a testing range on Earth. The screen displayed an empty field surrounded by rugged terrain. Suddenly, a series of targets appeared, hulking armored vehicles that resembled tanks. They were heavily reinforced, with energy shields shimmering around them. These are Varian juggernauts, Vasquez said, gesturing to the images. Your standard frontline heavy armor, considered nearly invincible by your own assessment. Overlord Yakel's mandibles clicked rapidly in what passed for a grin among the Varians. And you think your little rifle can penetrate our shields? I would be entertained to see that attempt. Vasquez merely nodded. On the live feed, a team of human soldiers equipped with the AR-57S took position. The distance between them and the targets was nearly a mile, and they were facing an uphill battle against superior defenses. Yet their calm, methodical movements suggested anything but concern. One of the soldiers gave the signal, and the Gauss rifles activated with a sharp hum. Unlike traditional firearms, there was no deafening explosion of gunpowder or muzzle flash, just a low electric buzz followed by an almost imperceptible streak of light. Within milliseconds, the projectiles reached their targets. To the surprise of the assembly, the shields on the Varian juggernauts flickered and collapsed, followed by several explosions that ripped through the thick armor plating. The once impenetrable tanks were now smoking husks, reduced to wreckage in mere seconds. The assembly fell into stunned silence. Even Krastal and Thraxus were momentarily speechless. Yakel's mandibles twitched in disbelief, his confident posture now stiff with unease. Our rifles, Dr. Malik explained, combine kinetic rounds with destabilizing electromagnetic pulses that directly target shield frequencies. The result is not merely penetration, but total disruption of energy defenses and internal systems. Rivera added with a smirk, we focus on minimal collateral damage while maximizing effectiveness. This allows us to take down even the most fortified targets with surgical precision. The skepticism among the aliens was beginning to wane, replaced by grudging respect, though some still clung to their arrogance. A lucky shot, Counselor Thraxus muttered. We all know that one demonstration doesn't prove anything. What happens when your so-called precision weapons are overwhelmed by superior numbers or faced with true technological superiority? Commander Vasquez's smile was cold. Then perhaps you'll find the next demonstration even more enlightening. The first chapter ends with the assembly no longer laughing outright, but the seeds of doubt and concern had been planted. The humans were just getting started, and as Vasquez prepared for the next phase of the demonstration, she knew that by the end of it, these aliens would no longer find human weaponry a subject of mockery. Chapter 2. The Unseen Edge. The first demonstration had left the assembly in a state of uncomfortable silence. The smirks and scoffs from the alien dignitaries were replaced with narrowed eyes and twitching expressions. They had witnessed human weapons tear through shields and heavy armor in seconds, something that had taken most of them by surprise. But for many of the species represented, one demonstration wasn't enough to sway generations of ingrained superiority. General Krastal was the first to break the silence. He leaned forward with a dismissive grunt, his imposing figure casting a shadow over his platform. "Impressive trick, human. But one well-placed shot doesn't win a war. Our fleets number in the millions. Against a true army, your little kinetic pea shooters would be crushed under sheer numbers." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Galactic Council, after all, represented civilizations that had conquered entire star systems, some with a single ship. They believed in the doctrine of overwhelming force, where battles were determined by who could deploy the most firepower in the shortest time. Against such thinking, precision was often seen as irrelevant. Commander Vasquez, however, wasn't swayed. "You're right, General, numbers matter. But what if those numbers are irrelevant? What if your soldiers and ships can't even get close enough to engage in a fight?" Her words drew frowns of confusion from many in the assembly. Before anyone could respond, Vasquez gestured to Lieutenant Rivera, who keyed in a command. The central display shifted to a live feed of space, a vast, empty expanse of stars and swirling nebulae. "This is a remote testing site in the Epsilon sector," Rivera began, his voice calm and confident. "We've placed a standard fleet simulation here, comprised of automated drones programmed to mimic a variety of alien tactics. Each of your species' combat styles is represented: heavy barrages, swarming maneuvers, cloaked strikes, you name it." The display zoomed in to show hundreds of ships materializing out of warp, forming into various formations. They were sleek and angular, some glowing with energy fields, others shimmering in and out of phase. It was a fearsome display of coordinated might. "And here's our test subject," Rivera continued, as the camera panned to a lone vessel hovering far away from the incoming fleet. It was a human warship, smaller than most frigates in the galaxy, a stark contrast to the massive, bristling battleships deployed by the Assembly's members. A ripple of laughter broke out among the aliens. Counselor Thraxis scoffed. "One ship against a fleet? Are you joking?" The Jarek general grinned, his sharp teeth bared in amusement. "You're making this too easy. Even with your precision, you cannot win against overwhelming numbers." Vasquez allowed the assembly their moment of amusement, and then she spoke, her voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. "I invite you all to watch closely. Pay attention to how our ship moves, how it reacts." With a signal from Rivera, the simulation began. The alien fleet accelerated, engines flaring as they closed in on the lone human vessel. Weapons charged, energy beams crackled, and missiles locked onto their target. The assembly watched, expecting to see the human ship overwhelmed in moments. But then, the unexpected happened. The human ship shimmered for a brief moment, and suddenly, it wasn't there. "Where did it go?" Overlord Yakel snapped, his mandibles twitching furiously. His eyes darted over the display, searching for the missing vessel. But it was gone, completely invisible to the fleet's sensors. "It's not cloaking," Dr. Malik explained with a hint of pride in her voice. "We developed what we call quantum phase shifting. Our ship isn't just hiding, it's moving between quantum states, rendering it untargetable by conventional methods." The alien fleet fired in all directions, beams of energy slicing through empty space. Missiles streaked through the void, exploding harmlessly, but the human ship was nowhere to be found. And then, like a ghost, it reappeared, right behind the main battleship leading the alien formation. In an instant, the human ship's weapons came to life. But instead of firing a traditional barrage, it unleashed a precise sequence of targeted pulses. The pulses were so concentrated that they bypassed the battleship's shields entirely, causing its systems to overload in a matter of seconds. The mighty warship's engines exploded in a burst of blue flame, sending it careening out of formation. The assembly was silent as they watched the single human vessel systematically dismantle the entire fleet. The human ship darted in and out of quantum phase, striking from angles that left the alien ships vulnerable and unable to react. Within minutes, the entire fleet was in disarray, with ships either destroyed, disabled, or hopelessly confused. "This is our doctrine," Vasquez stated firmly. "We don't need to match your numbers. We control the battlefield by deciding where and when we fight. You could deploy 1,000,000 ships, but if we render your targeting systems useless and strike where you're weakest, your numbers are irrelevant." Counselor Thraxus no longer looked amused. His shimmering form dimmed as he processed the implications. You can phase out of existence at will?" "Not out of existence," Dr. Malik clarified. "We're simply shifting in and out of observable space-time. It's a controlled process that allows us to evade detection and strike with precision." The representatives exchanged nervous glances. The humans had just demonstrated a tactical advantage that upended the core tenets of galactic warfare. It was one thing to have powerful weapons, but it was another to make an entire fleet irrelevant with superior maneuverability and strategic dominance. For the first time, doubt crept into the minds of those who had laughed at humanity's reliance on kinetic weaponry. Perhaps there was more to these Earthlings than their relatively small size in the galactic hierarchy suggested. But Vasquez wasn't done. She knew that while the phase shifting and precision strikes were impressive, there was one more aspect of human warfare that would truly leave a lasting impression, one that would challenge the very foundations of how the galaxy waged war. "Prepare for the final demonstration," she said, her voice tinged with the weight of certainty. Chapter 3. The Shock of Adaptation. The tension in the assembly hall was palpable. After witnessing the demonstration of quantum phase shifting and precise kinetic strikes, the representatives were no longer openly dismissive of human technology. The condescending sneers and laughter had been replaced by wary glances and murmured conversations. Yet deep down, the more militaristic species still clung to their belief in brute force and overwhelming numbers. It was ingrained in their civilizations, a doctrine that had guided their expansion and victories for millennia. General Krastal crossed his arms, his ridged scales bristling. "You've shown us tricks, human. Clever, yes, but nothing that cannot be countered with enough firepower. Your ships are still made of metal, your soldiers still flesh and blood. They'll break under a proper assault." Commander Vasquez didn't rise to the bait. "You're right that we're not invincible. We bleed, our ships take damage, and yes, there's always risk in battle. But that's the essence of warfare, adapting to the threats around us. It's something we humans have done for centuries, and it's what gives us an edge against opponents who rely solely on strength." She gestured to the display, which now showed an enormous hologram of what appeared to be a city, a densely packed urban environment on Earth. Tall skyscrapers, winding streets, and complex infrastructure sprawled across the image, all teeming with life. "This is New Jakarta, one of Earth's most populous megacities," Vasquez began. "It's home to over 50 million people and serves as a major hub for trade, culture, and research. Now imagine an enemy invasion targeting this city, a full-scale assault designed to break the human spirit by striking at one of our core population centers." The display shifted, showing a hypothetical scenario where a fleet of alien ships descended upon the city. Beams of energy and explosions filled the screen as the invaders bombarded the metropolis. Panic spread through the streets as citizens sought shelter, and ground forces mobilized to defend against the onslaught. General Krastal's grin returned. "Now this is more realistic. Your cities are soft targets. In an all-out war, no amount of precision would save you from orbital bombardment." Vasquez nodded. "You're right. We can't stop every attack, and sometimes the enemy will break through. But that's where our strength lies. Not in preventing the attack, but in how we adapt to it." She signaled for the next phase of the demonstration. The city simulation zoomed in to street level, showing human soldiers and defense systems preparing for the invasion. But instead of massive tanks or heavy artillery, the humans deployed something unexpected: small, unassuming drones and mobile units that seemed insignificant in comparison to the towering alien war machines. "These are our adaptive combat systems," Dr. Malik explained. "Each unit is equipped with a combination of advanced AI, swarm intelligence, and modular weaponry. They're designed to adapt in real time to any battlefield condition." The simulation showed the alien invaders unleashing their initial barrage, sending waves of destruction across the city. Buildings collapsed, and chaos erupted. But the human defense forces didn't respond with brute force. Instead, the drones and mobile units rapidly shifted their configurations, deploying energy shields, dispersing into smaller units, and launching countermeasures that neutralized incoming fire. The alien ground forces, heavily armored and bristling with weaponry, pushed forward into the city. But they were met with a relentless and ever-changing resistance. The drones reconfigured themselves into mobile barricades, deployed electromagnetic pulses to disable enemy systems, and even coordinated ambushes using guerrilla tactics. "What you're seeing," Vasquez said, "is a demonstration of how we turn weakness into strength. Our adaptive combat systems can assess an enemy's tactics and reconfigure themselves to exploit weaknesses. They learn, adapt, and evolve faster than any conventional army." As the simulation continued, the invaders found themselves bogged down in a nightmare scenario. The city's defenders weren't just reacting. They were predicting the enemy's moves, changing strategies on the fly, and even repurposing enemy technology against them. Within hours, what began as a seemingly unstoppable invasion was reduced to a costly, grinding quagmire. The invaders were bled dry, their forces decimated not by overwhelming firepower, but by a relentless series of small, precise actions that chipped away at their strength. The alien representatives watched in stunned silence as the simulation concluded with the invaders' defeat. Their forces were in ruins, and the human city, though battered, remained defiant. Counselor Thraxis's voice wavered as he spoke. "You're saying you can adapt your strategies instantly, without centralized command?" "Exactly," Rivera replied. "Our systems are decentralized, allowing them to operate autonomously while still coordinating with the broader network. This gives us unparalleled flexibility. Even if you knock out command structures, our units continue to fight, and they learn from every engagement." The implications were clear. Traditional doctrines of warfare, where centralized command and overwhelming firepower determined the outcome, were being challenged. The humans had developed a method of fighting that relied on adaptability, constant learning, and strategic fluidity. The galaxy's greatest militaries, built on rigid hierarchies and doctrines, were suddenly looking antiquated. General Krastal, for all his bravado, was visibly shaken. His scales rippled with unease, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. The humans were proving to be far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. But it was Overlord Yakel who finally voiced what many in the assembly were thinking. "You may have your fancy tactics and clever machines, but in the end, you're still human. You bleed. And when faced with the raw power of our fleets, when entire worlds are burned to ash, what good is your adaptability then?" Vasquez's expression darkened. "That's a fair question. But before you judge us by our flesh and blood alone, let me show you what happens when humans are pushed to the edge." She nodded to Rivera, and the next and final demonstration began. Chapter 4. When Humans Pull the Trigger. The atmosphere in the assembly hall was tense. The alien representatives had seen enough to know that humanity was not to be underestimated. Their phase-shifting technology, adaptive combat systems, and precision tactics had shaken the foundation of galactic military doctrine. Yet, the ultimate question remained: what would happen when humans were pushed to their limits, when diplomacy and strategy gave way to raw, unbridled conflict? Commander Vasquez stood at the center of the stage, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the assembly. Throughout our history, humans have faced threats that seemed insurmountable. From the earliest days of our civilization, we've had to adapt, innovate, and find ways to survive against overwhelming odds. But survival is not enough. We also know how to finish a fight, when there's no choice but to end a conflict decisively. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle over the assembly. You've seen our precision, our adaptability. Now it's time to see what happens when we choose to strike with full force. The display shifted to a different battlefield. This time, a barren, war-torn world on the fringes of the galaxy. The ground was scorched, the air thick with ash, and the ruins of ancient cities lay crumbling in the background. It was a grim reminder of how destructive wars could become. This is Praxis 4, Rivera explained. A planet where, during a recent conflict, an alliance of rogue factions attempted to overrun our outpost. They deployed tens of thousands of soldiers, supported by heavily armored vehicles, orbital bombardment platforms, and biological warforms designed to overwhelm us. The screen showed the overwhelming force descending upon the outpost, a flood of enemy units swarming toward the last remaining line of human defenders. The outpost was little more than a heavily fortified bunker surrounded by makeshift barriers. It was clear that, despite their best efforts, the humans were heavily outnumbered and outgunned. "We held out as long as we could," Dr. Malik said, her voice tinged with grim determination. "But in the end, we had no choice but to activate Project Sledgehammer." The display zoomed in on a device mounted on the outpost's central tower. It was a sleek, menacing object with an array of emitters and containment fields humming with barely contained energy. The assembly watched in morbid curiosity as the humans made their final preparations. "You wanted to know what happens when we're pushed to the brink," Vasquez said. "This is what happens." With a single command, the device activated. There was a brief, blinding flash of light, followed by a low-frequency hum that reverberated through the chamber. The alien representatives leaned forward, trying to comprehend what they were witnessing. Then, without warning, the landscape of Praxis 4 began to warp. The ground cracked, and reality itself seemed to distort as gravitational forces spiraled out of control. The enemy forces, once advancing with relentless determination, were suddenly thrown into chaos. Their ships were torn from the sky, crushed under the weight of their own gravity. Soldiers and war machines were ripped apart as the very fabric of space bent and twisted. Project Sledgehammer is a gravitic weapon, Rivera explained. It generates localized singularities, essentially micro-black holes, that can be directed and controlled for short periods. The result is the complete annihilation of anything caught within its effective range. The simulation continued, showing how the singularities moved across the battlefield like hungry voids, consuming everything in their path. Entire divisions of enemy troops were erased in moments, reduced to nothing more than collapsing points of light before vanishing into oblivion. The once overwhelming enemy force was obliterated, leaving only silence in its wake. Vasquez's voice was cold as she delivered the final blow. "This is our last resort. When all else fails, when diplomacy is no longer an option, and when we're pushed to the edge, we pull the trigger. And when we do, it's not just a single shot, it's the end." The assembly sat in stunned silence. There was no laughter, no mockery left in them. The humans had shown not only their ability to fight with precision and adaptability, but also the capacity for total, devastating force when necessary. The message was clear. Humanity was not a civilization to be taken lightly. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Even General Krastal, who had been the most vocal in his disdain, remained silent, his eyes fixated on the aftermath of the demonstration. Counselor Thraxus, usually quick to offer snide remarks, could only muster a faint glow as he processed what he had seen. Overlord Yakel finally broke the silence. You would risk destroying entire planets? Why? For what purpose?" Vasquez met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "Because we value life. We'll do everything in our power to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, to find peaceful solutions. But when our backs are against the wall, when there's no other choice, we will fight. And when we fight to win." The assembly remained quiet, the gravity of her words sinking in. They now understood that the humans were not just another species seeking to carve out a place in the galaxy. They were survivors, innovators, and when pushed, the most formidable of foes. The Galactic Council adjourned that day with a newfound respect and fear of humanity. No longer were the humans seen as backward or primitive. They had demonstrated their capabilities with chilling clarity, and the galaxy would not soon forget the lesson they had delivered. As the human delegation left the assembly hall, Vasquez exchanged a glance with her team. They had done what they set out to do. The galaxy had been put on notice. The humans may not have the biggest fleets, the most advanced energy weapons, or the sheer numbers of their rivals, but they had something far more dangerous: a willingness to adapt, innovate, and when the time came, pull the trigger without hesitation. The assembly sat in stunned silence. There was no laughter, no mockery left in them. The humans had shown not only their ability to fight with precision and adaptability, but also the capacity for total, devastating force when necessary. The message was clear. Humanity was not a civilization to be taken lightly. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Even General Krastal, who had been the most vocal in his disdain, remained silent, his eyes fixated on the aftermath of the demonstration. Counselor Thraxus, usually quick to offer snide remarks, could only muster a faint glow as he processed what he had seen. Overlord Yakel finally broke the silence. You would risk destroying entire planets? Why? For what purpose? Vasquez met his gaze with unwavering resolve. Because we value life. We'll do everything in our power to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, to find peaceful solutions. But when our backs are against the wall, when there's no other choice, we will fight. And when we fight to win. The assembly remained quiet, the gravity of her words sinking in. They now understood that the humans were not just another species seeking to carve out a place in the galaxy. They were survivors, innovators, and when pushed, the most formidable of foes. The Galactic Council adjourned that day with a newfound respect and fear of humanity. No longer were the humans seen as backward or primitive. They had demonstrated their capabilities with chilling clarity, and the galaxy would not soon forget the lesson they had delivered. As the human delegation left the assembly hall, Vasquez exchanged a glance with her team. They had done what they set out to do. The galaxy had been put on notice. The humans may not have the biggest fleets, the most advanced energy weapons, or the sheer numbers of their rivals, but they had something far more dangerous, a willingness to adapt, innovate, and when the time came, pull the trigger without hesitation.